Hello again and welcome to the section on setting up the project. In simpler tutorials you are often asked to create one project within Visual Studio. However, in order to implement solid principles and easier maintain code, we need to create a solution and create multiple projects within that solution. A common pattern in application development is layering. Any application, be it a website, a mobile app or a desktop app, can be split into distinct separate layers. Each layer will be responsible for a particular part of the application. With MVC websites, we have the start of this layering built in. MVC stands for Model, View, Controller, with Model, View and Controller each being a separate layer. We will take this one stage further, however. First of all, let's break down the typical app. At the very top of the layers, we have the View or UI layer. This is responsible for presenting something to the user that they can interact with. In a website, this would typically be the HTML pages. In any data-driven application, we will also need a database to store the data in. In MVC, we have a view, and we also have a controller that is responsible for passing the data to the view. As the user interacts with the view, the controller passes the data back to the database. Finally, we have the model. This is the definition or structure of your data. In most cases, the model definition will have one-to-one mappings with the database table. For example, in a model, you'll have a product description, a price and a product ID, all making up the product entity. These will have one-to-one mappings with a product table that will store those fields. However, as we'll see later, that doesn't have to be the case. This is all very well and good, but if the controller is interacting directly with the database, we're tied into whatever technology we have used from the start. Plus, the whole code base for editing data is mashed into the controller logic. These facts are obviously against solid principles. So the next thing what we want to do is create a DAL or data access layer. The DAL is responsible for all database interactions, for example creating records, updating records and deleting records. These are often referred to as CRUD or CRUD methods. We have a number of technologies available to us to achieve this: ADO.NET for direct access, or using an object relational mapper or an ORM framework such as NHibernate or Entity Framework. An ORM basically takes your model definition and automatically maps it to the tables within the database. It can also take care of creating and updating the actual database tables for you, but we will get into that in a later section. For our project, we'll be using Entity Framework by Microsoft. Why? Well, because I'm a Microsoft evangelist and I always like to use Microsoft's own frameworks where possible. However, they all pretty much work in the same way. In between our data access layer and our controllers, we may have a bunch of additional services. This is not always the case. If it's a simple mapping of data to screen, we might not need it. But services are generally modules that take on a particular purpose and help us break down the application in much more granular. So for example, we might have a shipping calculator or an email service. By presenting these as separate modules, we can plug them in and out of the main application as required, and we can also update the services in question. Finally, if we want true dependency inversion, i.e. if we want to be able to swap out modules without breaking the overall application, we need to create some interfaces that will define the structure of our modules. We generally stick these in another project called contracts or infrastructure. Each of these layers or modules can generally be encapsulated within a project of their own, and this is what we will be doing next. Each of these projects will form the overall solution.